All right, good morning. Good morning. How has everyone had enough coffee to start things off this early? This feels early to me anyway. About a week ago, I was in San Francisco, and I think mentally I'm still on that time zone. So I don't know where that actually leaves me right now. But hopefully it leaves me awake enough to keep you upbeat. And I'm basically the warm-up act for Liz, who's not here yet. She's busy doing her slides. So I'm the get you pumping and ready for Liz act this morning, which is pretty cool. Okay, so who writes code in the room? Who writes code every day, roughly? Okay, there's some people in the room. Good, okay, fine. I just want to get a balance so I know who I'm speaking to, at what level, and what, I don't want to go too deep and crazy into angle brackets or anything silly. Okay, so this talk is a new one, and it's something I care massively about compared to everything else I do, which obviously in comparison I compare nothing about. This one's a big one for me in that, to carry on from what Paul was saying, I think he's absolutely right. People are going to be where it's at going forward, but it's going to be that strange marriage between people, technology, processes, and practices that we've been notoriously bad at getting right in this industry. And what I'm going to talk about is actually a real tour of what I see as the major ailments of software development. I hope I don't make it too negative a start to the day. But maybe it throws down the gauntlet a little bit for everybody to start thinking about these things. And maybe we can actually get a bit better at them and heal this strange patient that is software development. Okay, very first of all, I just would like to, most people in the room will have no idea who this man is. But anyone who stands on a stage like this will have a rough idea who he might be. This is a comedian from the UK, unfortunately passed away last week. He's an absolute genius. I'm pretty sure it translates well into Polish. So if you haven't seen anything he's done, go and have a look. Absolutely awesome. And frankly, he's one of the reasons I go up on a stage at all. Being an introvert myself, this is frightening. And people like this help me get up there and actually do this thing. So I just wanted to put that up there as he unfortunately passed away last week. Rick Mayer was an absolute genius. Okay, so who am I? Well, I am in a very privileged position to be able to engineer my own job role. I used to be a CEO of several companies. I have this unfortunate habit of starting companies and then selling them. It's substantially painful. But I found that as a CEO, it's kind of a badge you get, and you become this person that has to stand there and like spreadsheets. And I can't do that. I cannot, for love nor money, think a spreadsheet is interesting, even when it tells me we're in profit. So my real job is pretty much either this or Iron Man. I'm working towards either end. I'm not sure where I'm going yet. Basically, I'm a chief scientist, which means I can be as insane as I like. And it means I can enjoy our industry for what it is. And it means I can do talks like this, where I can talk very brutally about what we do. And I don't really have much of an agenda other than to point out what's wrong or what's right. Okay, so this is the inhumanity of software development. Just to point out, there aren't many slides in this particular slide set, right? So there's almost no slides. I'm a big fan of not using slides. I think it's really nice to be able to talk to you. I could put slides online and just, talk over it, but it'd be much nicer to have chats with you. And now that I've seen that there are booths all the way along the side here, right? This is just the precursor. After this is done, come and find me. I warn you, I'm an introvert. I will hide. But when I do hide, hunt me down. Okay, and have conversations with me. I'm assuming at some point it becomes okay to have beer in this microbrewery, and at that point is a great time to catch me. Okay, so there'll be absolutely almost no slides on this one. And what we're going to do instead is first of all talk about the inhumanity of process. So we've spent, 14 years now doing all sorts of efforts in how we manage our work and bring it to the table, and with the target of actually adapting as we go. Okay, that's a big deal for me, and that what we do, I think agile is a pretty awful term in many respects, because first of all, it's got a lot of baggage, but if you look at the sort of root of the word, it doesn't entirely describe very well what we're trying to do. It's got too many other options. And I'm a big fan of adaptable. What I want to do is create software and systems that can adapt to the needs of human beings all the time. If it can adapt, then I'm doing things right. So I very much prefer the term adaption or adapting to agile. But that aside, I think it's fair to say there are certainly some people in this room and generally in the industry that have done a pretty good job with process. I think there's a lot of thought that's gone into it. I don't subscribe to the negative view that we've just piecemeal adopted from other industries. I've seen a little bit of it. But I don't think that's all we do. I think we've innovated, we've worked hard. Process actually isn't that inhumane, in my opinion. There are worse culprits and criminals out there. So let's have a look at some of those. Okay, so the inhumanity of practices. Okay, I'm going to start with the eponymous culprit, which is pair programming. Okay, how can there possibly be anything wrong with pair programming? It's got so many beautiful effects to it, right? We end up getting quick feedback loops, and everyone feels a lot better about the software we're building, and you get to work with somebody all the time, and that's human interaction, and that's really good and important. Okay, I'm going to draw you back to something I've mentioned a couple of times so far. I am most certainly an introvert. That might seem odd to someone standing in front of 200 people, and it is. But I am most certainly an introvert. Once I finish on this stage, I will flee to a corner to recharge. And when I say hunt me down, that's almost masochistic. As an introvert, you can't sustain long conversations with lots of people. It's an easy test for introversion, by the way. I don't want to get into too much into character traits and what is and what isn't. But if you take for an example, just if you could understand the question, when you go to a party, when you walk into the party, do you sort of, even subconsciously, look to gravitate to have one-on-one conversations with people rather than get in the big thumping conversation in the corner? Who does that? Who goes to have a little conversation on the side, right? Okay, so that's a few hands going up. Okay, great. So it's about 50% is what we'll end up with normally. Okay, 50% is usually about right for introverts. Unfortunately, we have a world, certainly a culture in the West, of embracing extroversion as the norm. And we treat introverts or introversion almost as something that should just be overcome. And I think that does us a disservice. So coming back to pair programming, if you want to torture an introvert, make them have conversations all day long. Make them sit and feel very vulnerable and deplete their energy whilst they're constantly interacting with other people. Worse than that, stick them in an intellectual pursuit like software development where they want to be creative and completely inhibit that creativity by making sure that all their energy is put into conversation and relationships with other people. This is where I talk about the cult of extroversion. I think it's unfortunate that we don't realize that people are extremely unique, and introversion, extroversion is one huge continuum. And even that, it can be broken down to many different facets. But if we just take that one, I think it's very unfair to say that you need to be more extrovert, you need to be engaging with people all the time. There are great examples in the world where introverts have done incredibly amazing things by being their introverted selves. Okay, we certainly bought into this idea that we have to collectively brainstorm and groupthink, and we must all work together and throw our ideas up together. But in fact, an awful lot of progress and great things have come from the lone thinker. And like most things in this industry, it's not as simple as we all do it together. There's going to be a lot of variation. So back to pair programming, which is only one of the things I'd point at. Pair programming for me, I don't have a big problem with pair programming. I will pair program. But as an introvert, as someone who recognizes the fact they are introverted, I really can't do it all day. It will kill me. I will go home a quivering mess. It's not pretty. I'll probably drown my sorrows. I blame the fact that I would like to have a beer later on introversion and pair programming. Bit unfair, maybe. Okay. So what's the problem here is the mandatory pair programming. I don't know how many organizations are like that here in Poland, but certainly in London, there's a few organizations that have started to dictate in a generic sense or general sense, thou shalt pair program or thou shalt not touch the code. And I think that's a little bit dangerous, not least because I'm not sure it leads to the greatest code in the world, but also, to be honest, if you're an introvert, that's pain. That's basically, well, it's discrimination. It's going to stop me wanting to contribute as much as I would like to. So, first thing, be careful with pair programming. The other two particular problems I'd like to highlight. Okay, this is mostly for the people that are working in software development teams daily. And you may or may not have seen these effects. They seem to happen where people get very obsessed with their craft. I call it the culture of keyboard clacking. Okay, so if you go and, what's the sound of software development happening? Is it or is it silence? Or is it conversation? Now, in my experience, it's a combination of all three, but I would say of the least productive, it's, which by the way has got to be the biggest keyboard I've ever seen. But yeah, typing away, that's not where software happens. And if you're in a position of management, don't assume that because people are using keyboards at the speed of light, that they are thinking. They probably aren't. Or if they are, that's brilliant, but that's pretty amazing. I have actually been for interviews where the basic rule is, how fast are you with the IDE? I'm not. I'm terribly slow. I can't even touch type. But I don't care because software development doesn't happen there. Software development for me happens somewhere else. And unfortunately for every organization I've ever worked with, software development for me happens in the shower. So it's not an easy explanation, that one. I'd just like to go take a quick shower and have a think. Never an easy explanation to most management types, which is why I work for myself. But yeah, software development happens when you go out for a walk. It's when you're thinking. It's all about thinking. Design is another phrase for thinking about it. And thinking about it doesn't limit itself to one place. It certainly doesn't limit itself to the keyboard. So the culture of keyboard clacking, if you are in a position of management, please, I would implore you to stop worrying about, are they hitting the keyboard quickly enough? By the way, combine that with pair programming. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you sit down to pair program and someone is such a genius at keyboard clacking that they move into the next phase, which is keyboard ballet. It is literally a thing of beauty, but you have no idea what they've done. You're sitting there as the navigator, sort of pilot scenario, and you're supposed to be commenting on what they've just done, but all you've seen is done. I have absolutely no idea what files you've just changed. I have no idea what you typed, and now it doesn't compile. Slightly up there. But yeah, so keyboard ballet. Let's not optimize for that either, please. I would much rather we optimize for thinking in this industry. It would do us a lot better. Okay. The last two I'd like to leave you with is when it comes back to introverts, on practices anyway, is to think carefully about teams. Teams in this industry have become something of a cult, and there's good reasons for it. There is plenty of evidence to suggest that working in teams is extremely productive and that we can come up with often better than the sum of the parts solutions. But remember, you've got 50% roughly introverts in the room. And there's plenty of evidence to suggest there that introverts are more creative when allowed to work on something alone. So let them walk away and have a think. And this is something that we don't do very often. It's almost become frowned upon in many organizations I work with, is he's not a team player or she's not a team player. She's going to think about, they keep coming back with great ideas, but why don't they include us in that gestation period? If they're introverts, they can't. Speaking is one. I can't do that. I come up with my best ideas when no one else is talking to me. And if I try and brainstorm these ideas using a mind map or something on a wall, I don't come up with great ideas. I just come up with verbiage. Blah. And that's not what you're looking for usually. So again, I'm coming back to that introversion quality that many of us have. Just let people be individual if they need to be. The culture of teams can be taken way too far in this regard, in my experience. Okay. So, the other sort of things I could bring out, I think, retrospectives. Do you have any idea what a retrospective does to an introvert? Think of a rack where they're being positioned in a situation where they've got to open up completely and tell you what they've liked and disliked. And worse, they can't even think about it because they don't think when everyone's here. It's like an enforced party situation where you can't pair up and go and have a conversation with somebody. It's very difficult. So we have techniques for retrospectives where we try to help people go off and think and have their moments alone. Those are really, really important if you want to get the most out of 50% of the people there. Please do. I have been in retrospectives where I have watched the introvert. As an introvert, you almost get a radar for these things. You can watch the introverts flinch when things are going in a big group huddle way. It feels very uncomfortable. By the way, it's a bit odd that I'm speaking to 200 people and I'm an introvert. Actually, it's really simple. As far as I'm concerned, I'm talking to one person, whoever I'm looking at that moment. Okay, this is the technique for an introvert and public speaking, is I'm only talking to who I'm looking at right now. Hi. And that works for me. I cannot possibly talk to 200 people, but I can talk to one person by looking at them. Okay. Some of the other things to talk about in the practices area, I'll move on quickly in a sec, so I want to go on to the next section. But one of the things to look at very quickly is this idea of craftsmanship and mastery. I'd like to put out there that there's a bit of a concern I have in calling anyone a master of anything. That implies that they're almost done, or that they are always right. Speaking as someone who's got a lot of influence in some parts of the industry, being an open source developer and all that sort of thing, I am very wary of my influence and power in those regards. And so I can be very careful about what I say, because if you're the master, you get labeled as the truth. And the problem with that I have is that there's always better ideas out there somewhere, and they're not coming just from mastery. So I have a bit of an issue with the craftsmanship and mastery side of things too. I much prefer the Zen approach. This is an agile conference after all. I can talk about Zen, right? And no one's going to hit me. Okay, if you go for the Zen approach, the master doesn't know what the answer is. It's going to help you discover the answer for yourself. And I actually kind of like that mode of operation. Even when I'm doing software development, consultancy, or writing, I'll actually work with people to figure out how they get to the answer rather than trying to give them my answer, because they're never going to get the right lesson from that. Okay, so that's enough on practices. Now let's look at architecture and design. No? Still with me? Okay. Architecture and design and software. How can I possibly make this interesting? I'm not sure I can, but I'll try. Okay, so first of all, let's start with what architecture is. And that's something that has perplexed people in this industry for years and years and years. And we come up with lovely, furry terms like, it's the big decisions. Big being one of those wonderfully objective terms that we all agree on, right? What's big and what's small. Okay, is it a big decision or not? Is the language you use a big decision? Is the framework you use a big decision? Is that line of code you've written a big decision? Well, in truth, they can all look big, depending on how much impact they have. And I think that we could actually rebadge architecture as what it really is, which is philosophy. When you're approaching the architecture of a solution, you bring all of your ideas, all of your baggage, all of your experiences to that problem. Whether you're architecting a process change or whether you're architecting some software, you're bringing your thought processes to the problem. So the interesting thing about this is all those thought processes are built upon some general sort of axioms at the bottom that you just think are self-evident. And sometimes we haven't really thought about those. So the interesting thing in software development architecture at the moment is I think we're still stuck in the waterfall mode of thinking. We still believe with the right amount of time, the right amount of consideration, and the right genius moment, we will come up with the perfect, ideal architecture. And every time that doesn't happen, we assume that we did something wrong. I think that's flawed, and I think it's inhumane, and it's not doing ourselves any justice. The reason for it is, and this is going to get a bit wacky, I blame Plato. If you're going to blame someone from 2,000 odd years ago. It's a good idea, right? Because they're a long way away and they really can't argue with you. Whereas some of my peers here, they can argue with me, and I'm sure they will later. Plato, yeah, let's blame Plato. Bad Plato. Okay, so Plato's an issue because he got us sold on this idea that things could be perfect. There was the perfect form. There was this whole process of achieving excellence to get there, and it was so worth it, and it was the ultimate good. And in fact, to be fair, I think Aristotle also had the same issues, and most of them, actually, of that particular academy school of thinking. They really, really believed there was a perfection out there. No one more than Plato. Although, to be fair to Plato, at the end of his life, he did have one of those moments that you dread as someone who's come up with a school of thinking of going, I'm not sure I'm right. And the problem was, I don't think he was right, but unfortunately it has completely permeated Western thinking right into our current software development. Now, we've just spent 14 years killing Plato in our processes. We've been realizing that perfection doesn't exist. We've been realizing that we need to change and adapt as we go, because fundamentally we don't know what we're doing. It's research and development every step of the way. And if that's the characteristics of process, agile being built on these pillars, I believe, then we have to turn a lens back on our software architecture and go, what the heck is that thing doing? Unfortunately, though, when you look at software architecture, it's still thinking that you can get it right first time. Still believes that we'll get the right architecture and big decisions right first time. And everyone's petrified of those big decisions because we know deep down it's a lie. We're lying to ourselves. We do this a lot in this industry. We're lying to ourselves if we believe in the platonic perfection of architecture or design, and it hurts us. So what's the alternative? Well, it turns out that if you look at things a little differently, there is a perfectly good philosophical school we could have gone to. The Stoics would have told us that we were insane. Okay, the best example of Stoicism, as I can quote it, is Seneca's statement that, and Seneca was kind of a militant, rather successful Roman Stoic. He basically said, you do not know. The next day is not promised you. Okay? No, hang on. The next hour isn't promised you. Now, that's a fairly negative view on life on the surface. But in fact, it's very real. Every moment of your lives, you are not promised the next one. Now, we know that, we ignore it, we don't like to consider it too much. Seneca would advise us to think about it a bit more. I think in software and in our architecture and design, we really should be thinking about these things. We don't know what's going to happen next. We need to build architecture and design that helps us change because we don't know what's going to happen. We need to stop building architecture that is fundamentally in conflict with reality, and instead build architecture that accepts that we don't know. And there's a lot we don't know. And it gets worse. Okay, so let's all become Stoics in our software architecture. Yeah, which is why I call it the unreality of architecture and design, because we spend most of our time ignoring the real consequences and the real possibilities with our software, because we really don't know what's going to happen. And I think I may have a little bit of time just to tell you a quick story about how this feels. So who's in a software development team? Okay, cool. All right, who does daily stand-ups or something similar? Okay, sweet. And who does iterations of varying length? Most people, I imagine, do some sort of iteration. Okay, so imagine this, and I'm going to ask you to trust me. Do you trust me? You've only just met me. Trust me? Okay, shut your eyes. Close your eyes. Just relax. Let the coffee work its way through the system. Okay, it's sprint or iteration 10, to pick an arbitrary number. You have just wandered into your stand-up meeting, and like any sane human being, you've sat down. And you sit there, and you're feeling good. Really good. You are acing it. This is sprint 10, and that software is beautiful. The customer's happy, you're happy, life is good. You can hear the birds in the trees, and they're singing your tune. And then fortune or fortuna comes to bite you. What happens is, whoever the decision maker is, product owner or whatever label you'd like to give that particular person, they come into the room and they say the one phrase you have been dreading. I just like one small change. At that moment, I'm going to take you on a little emotional journey now. At that moment, the first reaction is anger. How dare you? How dare? I'll cancel the sprint. I'll throw all of my toys out the proverbial pram. And right now I hate you. How dare you tell me that we agreed at the beginning of this sprint what we were going to do. How dare you change your mind? That is swiftly followed by the next emotion, which is guilt. Because deep down, really deep down, you're supposed to be an agile software developer. What does agile mean? We embrace change. And so you know that you'd like to accommodate this change. And it's worse than this, right? It's worse than this, because what's happened is you've hit what I call the elephant in the stand-up. You've hit the situation where your architecture and design and all the code that you wrote yesterday, which we colloquially call legacy, is now in conflict with reality. And it's not your fault, because you're not asked to think about how architecture needs to change. And that's something we need to start doing. Okay, you can open your eyes now if you've still got them shut. Okay, very last thing I'll talk about that is that what happens next. Without a doubt, what happens next is we lie. Okay, we use a couple of terms. First one is we need to do some refactoring. You've heard of refactoring, right? It's a real term. Okay, we need to do that for about a month. Are we okay? We good? No, you're going to get no new features. No, we need to do refactoring. It's a real thing. You've heard of it. We've got to do it. Stop getting in the way of the agile process, man. We're doing refactoring now. Now, I've looked at refactoring, and by definition, it's supposed to be one small change that doesn't change the behavior of your system. If you need to do a month's worth of refactoring, you're not refactoring. Okay, let's talk about what else you might use as an excuse. Let's give you that too. The next one is a beauty, technical debt. Oh, you've heard of the term technical debt? We've done that. We were moving way too quick. It's your fault. And we built this stuff, and now we've got to redress the balance. We've got to pay some back. Yes, similar message. You're not going to get anything for a month or so, and we've got to really repay the system back. Once again, we're cloaking the real problem, which is our software can't keep up with the change that's come in. I'm not saying that every change should be small. And there are times when a product owner or someone like that will say, I want something small, and it's not. But what you're trying to avoid is those situations where you have to lie, we feel the urge to lie, when actually it's not. It really should be a small change, but it's not. Okay, so that's the inhumanity that's caused by architecture and design. Last of all, very much last of all, the inhumanity of doctrine. Now, I realize I'm on dodgy ground now. because I'm going to be starting to sacrifice some of the very, very things we hold dear. Not in a very bad way, I hope. I have an issue with doctrine. I have an issue with manifestos. And we've got one. And it's a good one. But there's a problem with manifestos very, very deep down in what they are. Okay, so the problem I have with manifestos is that they ossify the opinions around a particular area. They immediately crystallize and make it hard to change something. So my argument in this regard is that I believe that the Agile Manifesto, the good things it's done are wonderful. What we haven't really noticed is the bad things it's done. Because to a certain degree, is that it? I'm gone? I've got to go? The manifesto, the challenge with it is that it ossifies. Now, if you ever go to Ireland, ossification means something completely different. I realize this. Terminology-wise, ossification means drunk, which actually still works. Because I think manifestos are ossifying, so they either get you drunk or they either stop you ever thinking about and challenging these things. So that's my argument, really, is that I believe that the danger of manifestos, and one of the reasons I really try not to write any or contribute to any or sign any, is because I feel that they immediately ossify and potentially constrain what can be done and invented upon. So just something to put out there is that we really have one of the better ones in this industry, but I do think that we need to very carefully attack and move on from many of its thinking because there's lots of innovations on top that we could apply. Okay. So my remember and apply section, I'm not sure how much time I've got left, but I'm going to quickly get through this and then I'm out. I've got 0. That's a pretty solid 0. Okay, very quickly. Introverts, watch out for them. They're out there. There's loads of them. I am one. If you want to talk to me about what makes an introvert, come and grab me. I'll be in one of the booths hiding in a corner. That's what we do. Understand and balance across your teams. So understand who you've got and what they do and how they operate. Everyone is so unique and different. Please be human about it and look for those sorts of character traits. It will get a lot more out of your teams. Embrace an individual's journey. Don't just shoehorn everyone into teams if you feel that that's just the way it should be done. Watch out for the introverts who would find that incredibly painful. And you're just not getting their creativity because that's not where it comes from. Most of all, be kind to people. And let's make our processes and practices and architecture and design consider humans and change and reality a bit more. Okay? Being scientific and open versus doctrine. Okay, and team building is not one to get to know your people, and thank you.